Hi Greedy 3Ders, if you've been following my videos you'll see that my last video I made Mr. Stark or Mr. Stank here from the Wicked set, the Wicked Diorama. Today we'll be making Iron Man himself from the same diorama. Now make sure you go over to Wicked and check out their Patreon. They do some amazing Marvel characters. It's absolutely amazing. Go over there, check them out. They produced this one and I'm absolutely chuffed with how this has come out. The base is the arc reactor and I put a light in there and I'll talk to you how I did that. It's really simple, really easy, no dramas at all. Now if you like what you see today, please subscribe to the channel. If you want to join my Patreon scheme, you would be more than welcome to. We would love to have you on board. All the details will be in the description below. But today we're going to talk about the making and the painting of Iron Man. As a base, I'm using this primer. Now it says matte on there, but this is anything other than matte. It's really gloss, and the finish is just what I'm looking for a metal base. So when it's all gone on, this is what it looks like. And as you can see, if that's matte, I'll eat my hat. And it dries, that was a bit of a rhyme, wasn't it? It dries just like that. So I was really pleased with that result. Now, of course, the rest of the model has had a coat in exactly the same way, making sure you keep a good distance from your model and you are shaking your can up really well, and also be really careful you don't get any drips or any runs. It's really easy with a rattle or a spray can to do that. Now, to add that metal effect further, I've used some of this Green Stuff World chrome metal, and I've given everything just a real light coating of metal across there. Now, I feel that this just adds to the shine effect. It just adds to the fact that I want it to look like it's made of some kind of futuristic alloy, and that's what I got with this Green Stuff World paint. So I was really pleased with that, and everything else of course has had exactly the same treatment across. I haven't given it a heavy layer. It's not had a massively thick layer. You don't want to do that really. I just want to give it a metal look, and that is what I feel I've achieved here. And there it is, all drying. Now make sure you let this paint dry before you move on to the next stages. And this is the paint that I'm using, the Ford Solar Gold. This I found from quite a few forums that I've looked at was the best gold paint for Iron Man. And I'm just going to give it a real light coat on the areas that I want it to be gold. Now the thing with these cans is shake them really well. Make sure you leave them to dry before you do anything else, because they take a little bit longer to dry than basic airbrush paints. So we want to make sure that they're dry and you don't get any fingerprints or runs on it. Now for the red, again the Ford Regency red metallic spray was what I used, and I just gave the main body a blast of this all over, considering the majority of this is going to be red, and I am really pleased the way the colours come out. Now what I'd be interested to hear from you guys is what colours you use for your Iron Man models. Not everybody will use the same colours, and I had a host of paints, but I settled for this one based on user reviews and also having bought some and given it a quick test. But what did you guys use? I say I'd be really interested to know. Now the base was a nightmare, and as a friend of mine said, it gave him PTSD. You know you are there, Dave. There's loads and loads of pieces to this, and I've glued it all together as best I can. There are some gaps that are going to need to be filled, but this was a mission to print it at full scale and to glue it all together and to get it all fixed. But it was imperative to do this as part of it. Now what I wanted to do for the arc reactor, I wanted it to look a little bit old and battered. I didn't want it to look like it had just come off the factory line, so I wasn't too fussed with some of the join problems and some of the gaps in it, and I was going to use them to my advantage a little bit later on. And I used a couple of things to seal the majority of the gaps. I used some wood filler, and I also used this precision bottle with some resin to fill the majority of the smaller gaps. But again, I wanted it to look a little bit old and like it was the first arc reactor that he used when he got out of the cave in Iron Man 1. So I'll do a little bit of aging work on it, but I don't want it to look pristine, and that is the look I went for, and that's the look I got. It was a little bit of a nightmare to print, but it did come out relatively all in one good set, and it fitted together reasonably well. Now I masked off the gold areas all in preparation for popping my red on, and I had made sure I let the gold dry thoroughly before I did this, and I gave a light coat all over it. Now that can of paint that I bought, and I'll be a link in the description to these cans, the red, oh God, it just about did it. It almost ran out on the last bit, but I just about managed to get it. So if there'd have been any need to touch up or any bits like that, I'd have had to go and buy a new tin because they're only quite small, but I had just enough to finish the job. Now once that was done, it was time to move on to the brush stage, and I've used these high detail brushes that I was gifted, and you can get these from the item description. They're really good for really small parts, and I'm just taking some plain old white here, and I'm going to do Iron Man's eyes with that. It took about 3 coats to get it how I wanted it. Take your time, don't go over your gold, and that's the end result you're after. Using some rough iron, I just concentrated on some of the darker areas of his mask. That's namely, there's some parts on the side of each side of him, and also across the join, across where his mouth would be. Again, a real fine brush that set does incorporate to paint that in, and I got the result that I wanted just fine. Using some white again, I'm going to use that to just paint on his arc reactor. Now what you can do if you want to add another effect on this is just paint some clear lacquer across it, or some clear resin, and seal it just to give it that glassy effect. And I haven't done it, but I will do that. It's not been caught on camera because I haven't done it yet, but I will do that a little bit later on just to give it that final look. And the same again on his hand repulsors. Using some Green Stuff World Chrome again, but this time on a little bit of a sponge, I'm just going to add some metallic-y looks to his face. I'm just going to make the helmet look a little bit worn and a little bit battered. I just don't want him to look, again, like he's come off the production line. I want him to look like he's been in a few battles. So using this sponge and just dabbing a little bit of the silver paint on there, and taking some of the excess off with a kitchen towel, and then dabbing it on and rubbing it and making it random little dabs and little spots all across him. And it was time consuming this, and when you think I've got to do the whole model, it is going to take some time to do it, but it's well worth doing it, and the effect at the end is wonderful. Now if you take a toothpick and get some of the paint on it, you can roll it across the edges, and that gives you a clean silver look as opposed to splodges and splatters. And I think that's another effect that you can use. The other thing you can do with a toothpick is get a dollop on and then just make it look like he's been hit with a bullet. So plop a dollop on and scrape it across and make it look like there's a ricochet mark on his armour. Again, very time consuming, but the end result is really, really worth it. And it's worth doing this as you're going to be looking at it for a long time. And that's what he looks like at the end. I hope you agree that looks really, really detailed and nice. Now, this was a labour of love. Using exactly the same techniques, I took about an hour really to go over the whole model, giving all of the extenuations a little bit of silver, trying to make it look different in all the areas, concentrating on the bits that would be mobile, like under his arms and on his legs, to give those a little bit more wear and tear marks and around his fingers. But just take your time with this, enjoy it, and just I really enjoy aging it up, and I'll just leave you with this bit with a bit of music just so you can watch the last part. Now, just moving back to the base, anyone who's done 3D printing will tell you, you can't just take these things off the printers on 90% of the times and they're finished and they don't need any work. You need to do some prep work. So on the base, even though I want it to look a little bit aged and a little bit battered, there's still an awful lot of prep work to do. And for that, I'm using some sandpaper, I'm using some little files, and I'm just taking my time and going over it to try to smooth out some of the rough edges. Really important to do this. 3D printing is not a 5-minute job. It takes a long time to do it. Now I did want this to look aged and battered, as I've said, so what I did do was I did a little bit of sort of enforcement work really on some of the areas that were broken, just to make them look like the edges were a bit frayed. And once I'd done all that and I was happy with the end result, I got some basic primer and just give it a layer all over, just so I've got a base layer to start with, and just so I can have a look at what it looks like with a colour on. It's easier to do this with a nice rattle can of grey than to put your own paints on and then see the idiosyncrasies that you want to fix. I was happy with that, so I moved on to some plate metal just to go around the whole thing again to give it another base layer now of a silver. But what I didn't catch on video was I did the centre with this colour. This is Ionic Blue from Army Painter, and I just did the centre part of that, and once that was all done, this is what it looks like. Now the light in the middle, I'll talk to you about the light I used, but I just wanted you to see what it looked like with the silver on the outer edge at this stage and the blue in the middle. And what I also did was just in the centre of the blue there, I gave it a little bit of white just to lighten it up a little bit, and that's the base well and truly started. Now taking some of this colour here, this is the Citadel colour, the base colour of gold. And you can get this from the item description. I'll put a link in there. I'm just going to paint the copper. Now it looks like a copper colour, this gold, so I was really happy, and that's what I wanted the arc reactor to look like after looking at some reference pictures. So a nice big thick brush and some of that gold colour, and I just concentrated on getting that all the way around the arc reactor. And just from this perspective now, looking down on it, looks nice, doesn't it? I'm really chuffed with how this is coming on. But of course, like I said to you at the start, I want this to look a bit aged and battered, so I'm going to add some rust effects on it using some of this rust paint from the Army Painter and a little sponge and a bit of kitchen roll, and I'm just going to dab it on across the areas that are a little bit damaged and a little bit where the joins aren't perfect, just to make it look like it's meant to be there. It's a little bit of a faux pas, a little bit of a cheat, but hey ho, that's what 3D printing is all about. And that's why I wasn't too bothered with some of the joins not being absolutely 100% accurate. Now if you want this to have that factory look, you're going to have to work a darn sight harder with it, but for me it's come out of a cave and it's been battered for a while. And again, I'm putting some of these effects all over the centre of it too, just to even it all up. Now you might see some of the rust on the outer edges. I didn't like it there, so I resprayed that with silver and just kept the centre of the arc reactor to look a bit aged and a little bit rusted. Now taking some soft wash from the Army Painter, I literally just coated the whole thing in the centre with it, just again to age it up and make it look like it's been a little bit through a battle or two. And again, that aging effect, so rust, I've put some wash on it and I've just allowed it all to gather. I've not been too careful with it, but the more you do with this, you can see it start to come to life and you'll see it start to work. Don't overdo it, but just give it a layer of that colour all over, add a few rust spots here and there, and away you go. And if you don't like what you're doing, you can always paint it back again and start again, so it's not the end of the world, but a little bit of confidence, take your time and have fun with it. Now for the lights, I've got two sets of lights. This is a powered USB light with a little switch, some LEDs, which again I'll put a link in the description that you can use. Now the benefits with this is it plugs in, so it's USB powered. It's got a little switch so you can turn it on and off and it won't run out of battery or anything like that. And that's absolutely perfect if you just want a white light to be nice and bright and coming on. Now if you want something a little bit different, the other thing that I'm using is these are little ever-ready lights that I used in my man cave. Energizer, sorry, and these come with a remote control. Now they're battery powered, and what you can do is turn them on with the remote control and change the colour of them. You can make them flash, you can make them do some disco dance, you can do all sorts of things with them. And if you want to add a little bit of realism to your model, you can do that with it. Now this is what the base looks like finished with the models on there, and I think it looks really, really nice, and I'm chuffed with it. In fact, I'm really, really chuffed with it. It looks aged, it looks like it's been battered, it looks rusted, and you can see the copper on there. I'm really chuffed. Now I put one of the lights under there so you can have a look what it looks like when you can change the colour on it, and there we go. And don't you think that simple, easy effect makes all the difference? And when you think about it, the light is literally just sat underneath there. I've done anything else apart from sat the light under there. You can change the colours, you can turn it off and on when you want to. Is this the way forward for you? Yeah, it's up to you on that one. But it's all finished now, so let's have a look at the final reveal, and I hope you like it. I hope you enjoyed the making process of this diorama, and I've got to be honest, I always say this, but this truly is one of my favourite dioramas. Iron Man being one of the first Avengers to have a movie made. Not the first, I know, but one of the first. And I'm wearing my Black Sabbath t-shirt here, taken from the Avengers, if you recall. And I really love Iron Man, and I love this diorama. I love the fact that Wicked are doing the characters. The latest one out is the Hulk with the Bruce Banner, the Mark Ruffalo Bruce Banner and the Hulk, and I can't wait to get to grips with that one. That's coming at some stage in the very near future. Now again, subscribe to the channel if you like what you see today. If you want to support the channel, there's a couple of ways you can do that. If you buy stuff through the description link, a little bit will kick back to me, and I'll just be able to carry on making stuff, keep the electric running in this place, and allow me to produce stuff like this, to produce videos for you guys. If you want to join the Patreon, you would be more than welcome to do so. And again, all the details are in the description. But for me, just comment, leave a like, help the YouTube algorithm by just making a little comment to say what you thought about it, whether you liked it, whether you didn't, what you would have done differently, or any comments you've got to make. And I'll see you next time, very soon, on Greedy 3D.